Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. We also invited Air Force Lieutenant Francisco Ashley Acedillo, but he's not able to come this afternoon. Pero he gave us a paper, and I'll try to read it within the time allotted. So, Lieutenant Acedillo is with the Philippine Air Force, but he's also the president of the Institute of Policy, Strategy, and Development Studies, Incorporated. So let me go into this paper. His paper is entitled Maintaining Democratic Civilian Control over the Armed Forces and National Police Amidst a Shift Towards Constitutional Federalism. So he opens with greetings that is to all of us here, and that he's unable to come. But in writing this paper, he says that I have made some preliminary, albeit bold, assumptions before proceeding with what I will consider plausible scenarios if and when the Chief Executive and Congress finally push for constitutional change. First, I am of the firm belief that under the Duterte administration, any revision of the Constitution will be less of a consolidation of democracy and a genuine effort towards federalism, but on the contrary, will be more of a consolidation of power in the Chief Executive and federalism, or some iteration of a new form of government as its thinly veiled political view. Second, in the same manner that Ferdinand Marcos succeeded in perpetuating himself in power beyond his two-term limit under the 1935 Constitution by co-opting a crucial segment of the military and constabulary police leadership at the time, so will Rodrigo Duterte need the assent of both the AFP and PNP leadership for his dangerous political experiment to succeed. Third, whatever form of government shall result from this constitutional change will matter little at the outset in how the military and the police will behave amidst this flux. It will be crucial, what would be crucial is how they will view this shift, whether or not it will deviate from or stay the course of the democratic civil-military construct that has been painstakingly developed post-EDSA. But by now, President Duterte must have realized that his template of a populist, iron-fisted and virtual one-man rule as mayor of Davao City will not be had at the national level. For all his bluster and blatant disregard for established norms of governance, human rights, and even basic decorum and decency in high office, he has come to the realization that there will be no riding into the sunset or him once his term to president ends. On the contrary, he faces a very grave prospect of international indictment of crimes against humanity before the International Criminal Court, and to a lesser extent, a domestic prosecution for similar crimes, as well as prosecution for graft and corruption under a hostile successor administration. These two primordial considerations to my mind are the driving factors in this frenzied push for an overhaul of the Constitution. This was never about democracy and good governance. As the Turkish want to say, look at Exhibit A. What I did in Davao is what I will do when I become President of the Philippines, or something to that effect. Precisely, I would use the same logic. The way he governed Davao City for more than 20 years would be the way he would like to govern as President. He has never made any pretensions to political plurality, to a tolerance for dissent and criticism, nor to evidence-based policy making and the like. It has all been shoot from the hip. He has no patience for the kind of governance, problematic as it was admittedly for all his predecessors since 1987. That has to deal with a recalcitrant Congress, an activist judiciary, robust constitutional bodies, a truculent media, and a reinvigorated civil society. Read his lips. His operational code is shockingly predictable, interspersed with word clues like the paper, martial law, kill, shoot, that human rights is bullshit, guerra, and all that sexy stuff. You will only hear from the Tagalog telenovela. Rightly or wrongly, this country has had a penchant for holding off to James' former presidents, as in the case of Estrada and Arroyo. And with most Given that grim prospect, same thing happening to Duterte, it behooves Duterte to ensure that he would have a very friendly successor. And given the fickle electorate that saw them embrace a deadly blow of the former president's son and ushering him into the presidency in 2010, the same fate surely awaits this dictator in waiting. This is not lost on Duterte. And so the ultimate goal of consolidating political power does not sound so remote and esoteric anymore. It is compelling. In less than a year's time after he assumed office, Duterte managed to visit at least 20 military camps. On the surface, this would be applauded as a clear gesture on the part of the President and Commander-in-Chief to know the men and women that he regularly sends into harm's way against the enemies of the state. A way to know and get the message across better and hear them out as well. Instead, this became another opportunity for Duterte to impose his daily monologue against drugs, crime, and corruption to battle-weary soldiers. I think it was his second camp visit when he dropped his epic Sueldo, Sigurado, Doblado in Fort Kasaysayan to the thunderous applause of our soldiers. And why not? Nobody, especially not me, nor Senator Biazon, nor Congressman Alejano, for that matter, would oppose a salary raise for our gallant troops. However, our experience in Congress and now our national budget is hammered out and begged the question, where will the President get the money? In short order, it became apparent that a long thought out new tax measure, the so-called train, intended as it was to fund a massive and ambitious infrastructure spree, became the casualty of Duterte's big promising waves, as more than 90% of the revenues of trade will simply go to the increase in the base pay of uniformed personnel, ranging from 50% for officers of various ranks to as much as 100% for enlisted personnel in the lower four ranks. That is probably why the Chief Executive is only too profuse in his praise and declaration of brotherly love for China and for Chinese President Xi Jinping. He has to get the money for bill from the cash-rich middle kingdom. Scanning the horizon of public service, the Duterte administration can also give the Ramos administration a run for its money in the number of retired military and police officers who have been appointed to government. That in itself is not bad, let me add, nor is this an attempt to denigrate our military and police retirees. They come highly qualified and well schooled. But in supposedly a democratic and pluralistic society, I wonder if this is healthy. Or is this another way to curry favor with those currently in active military and police service whose ties to those recently retired generals and senior officers go way back to their cadet days in their time as junior officers? It did not escape my attention that there was a not so deliberate attempt to use the nickname of a certain high-ranking police official as a vehicle for discussion. Literally, the anonymous use of Bato as a representation of a misplaced, albeit unquestioning loyalty for the President as a person and not to the Republic of the Philippines is disquieting to say the least. Used figuratively, if majority of these military and police service are Bato, and therefore unfeeling and uncaring, then this is also problematic. Not only that, it would also be transgressing the constitutional mandate of the AFP set forth in Article 2, Section 3, which has been discussed earlier. I am sure many here in the audience will counter back that this very same provision has been misused to justify a military intervention in the political process 17 years ago. And that point is well taken. For lack of time though, I sadly cannot indulge the point at this moment. Where shall the AFP and PNP anchor its action during a constitutional transition? I see at least two possible transitory scenarios, one problematic and one less problematic. A problematic scenario arises when there is a declaration of a revolutionary government, the 1987 Constitution is set aside, and both the Congress and judiciary have been shuttered. That truly creates a vacuum and a free-for-all that even Duterte may not have a lid on. In this scenario, it will only truly be the armed forces primarily, and the PNP complementarily, who will save the day. How? It is a real option for the security sector led by the AFP and PNP to stick to the Constitution regardless of such a scenario, because under existing law, specifically Executive Order 292 of the Administrative Code of 1987, states that the functions of the AFP are to uphold the sovereignty, support the Constitution, and defend the territory of the Republic of the Philippines against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This has been mentioned earlier. Then promote and advance the national aims, goals, interests, and policies. If President Duterte believes he may just get by with a mere technicality, declaring a revolutionary government and setting aside the Constitution, he may find himself outside of it and devoid already of his powers as President and Commander-in-Chief over all armed forces. All the AFP has to do, for example, is to stick to the Constitution and the law as cited previously, and Duterte will be in trouble. This has also been mentioned earlier. A less problematic scenario would be a transitory period wherein a new federal constitution, for example, has been drafted and is yet to be ratified by the people in what I presume would be a referendum. The AFP and PNP will simply uphold the status quo and eventually transition into whatever organization which have been really signed into under that new constitution. It has mostly been a discussion of how and what the armed forces will do in these scenarios. But what of the Philippine National Police? That is one not represented here. Unfortunately, the 1987 Constitution says very little about the National Police, since at that time it was drafted, the then Philippine Constabulary Integrated National Police was being intended for abolition, and so constitutional provisions were only made available for what would become a statutory national police under Article 16, Section 6 of the Constitution. That is as written below. The PNP's mission and functions were eventually fleshed out under Republic Act 6975 or the Department of the Interior and Local Government Act of 1990 that created both the DILG and the PNP. The PNP's function was to enforce all laws and ordinances relative to the protection of lives and properties, maintain peace and order, and take all necessary steps to ensure public safety, investigate and prevent crimes, effect the arrest of criminal offenders, bring offenders to justice and assist in their prosecution, exercise the general powers to make arrest, search, and seizure in accordance with the Constitution and pertinent laws, detain an arrested person for a period not beyond what is prescribed by law, informing the person so detained of all his rights under the Constitution, issue licenses for the possession of firearms and explosives in accordance with the law, supervise and control the training and operations of security agencies, and issue licenses to operate security agencies and to security guards and private detectives for the practice of their professions, and finally, to perform such other duties and exercise all other functions as may be provided by law. That makes the PNP, at least in theory, more susceptible if left in a vacuum. Conclusion. Let me close my piece by sharing to you this quote from the Facebook post of a government media editor and activist. And she said, "Anyone or any group that looks to the AFP as the nation's salvation from Duterte has no love for democracy or true concern for civil liberties. Ipaglaban ko ang mamamayan, hindi ang kapangyarihan." On the surface, you cannot disagree with that statement. For the record, meron pang second part ng statement niya, but it is not relevant to us here. The statement I just quoted is what is relevant to us today. It does make two bold assumptions, of which I both completely disagree. The statement that first assumes that since after martial law and after the restoration of democracy in 1987, the AFP has never evolved into a truly professional organization under civilian democratic control. Second, it assures that instead of being a protector of the people and the state, as per its mandate, it has in fact been an oppressor and a threat to civil liberties. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is sadly a narrative still stuck in the past. I will be the first person to admit that the AFP is not without its faults and vices, but to denounce it wholesale as incapable of upholding democracy and freedom, of being a shield of the people rather than a tool for a tyrant, stretches the imagination too much. Anong resibo ko? Let me cite to you recent events. In at least 3 instances, both the civilian leadership emanating from the Department of National Defense as well as that of the AFP publicly rebuffed Duterte when 1. Making overtures toward nationwide martial law. Their official position was that of disagreement, arguing that it was unnecessary. 2. Suggesting that he would make a complete pivot to China and even Russia, abrogating our long-standing alliances with the West, primarily with the United States. The Secretary of National Defense said he would caution the President against it. And 3. In a briefing to the administration, a perceived number 1 enemy, the Vice President, when asked by her about the possibility of a revolutionary government, the AFP Chief of Staff and his senior officer's response was a resounding no. I think it was also mentioned earlier by Senator Biazon and Congressman Ginanap. I may be defaulted and accused of bias for being a former man in uniform, pero kayo, search your hearts, bato ba talaga ang ating mga kasundaluhan at kapulisan? On the latter, I must admit, it is harder to defend and explain amidst the death toll of 20,322 as per official government figures. Other than that brief outpouring of public support for the PNP in the wake of the Mamasapano tragedy and the death of 44 SAF troopers, it shifted in short order to fear and loathing as soon as the Duterte administration rolled in and the bodies from the Tokhang started piling up. So in theory, and in fact, the image and reputation indeed of the PNP suffers more serious infirmity. I contend that between the AFP and the PNP, in considering these several troubling scenarios, the AFP will respond more coherently and with more cohesion as compared to the PNP. I say this rather uncharitably because both the facts on the ground as well as the downside of a purely civilian orientation for our policemen have taken their toll on unit and individual discipline. Also, you have to consider the statutory design of the police, regional, provincial, and subordinate units. They are fully under the control of local chief executives under the province, city, municipality, and even precinct level. So when a former mayor becomes president and starts ordering the PNP leadership as they were his city police, we have the excesses that we see now in this sham of a war of drugs. But by and large, I submit with guarded optimism na hindi po bato ang ating mga military at pulis. Pero ayaw ko rin o silang maging pusong mamon na kung hihikayatin ng isang pinuno tungkol sa isang diktadura ay sabay-sabay lamang silang sasagot ng yes sir. Gusto ko po sanang magpili silang gusto ko pa na manatili silang tulad ng pangdasal ng Pinoy. Matigas ang panlabas pero malambot at masarap sa loob. Mind you, the pandesal may be a pleasant everyday breakfast fare for the average one, but it is hard enough to deter if thrown at the face of a feckless wannabe dictator. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Salamat, Rico, Dr.